And number 5 is props, music, mise en scène.
My little sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Caveat with this one is only if it works for you.
Sure. So I know, for example, a lot of people really like miniatures. Personally, I really don't.
Yeah, they kill immersion for me. I don't like using them.
But used at the right time, they can be quite effective.
Absolutely.
So, for example, I ran Lost Mines of Phandelver for a group of students back when I was a teacher. And we did it all theatre of the mind, which is how I prefer, and the players got really invested in their characters, and they had a great time. And we also wound up going off the plot a fair bit, which, isn't that the point, really? But in the end, the final dungeon crawl, rather than trying to defeat the Black Spider, or whatever his name is, they actually had to team up with him to defeat the dragon, who is sitting in another town minding her own business in the original adventure. And the dragon was trying to breach the final dungeon and get some particular artifacts or something magical out of it. I forget the exact setup.
Okay.
But for that final battle only, I produced the full battle map. I had it all printed out to scale. I made sure to get my hands on the right miniatures. They got to choose the miniatures that represented their characters. And then when I put down the dragon in the middle, they were so excited for that final battle.
Nice.
And so it did help to increase immersion.
Yeah, totally.
Another point, though, that I've got for these sort of immersion props, music, mise en scène, miniatures, all of this stuff, is also keep it in your price range.
Yeah.
There is some amazing, amazing scenery and miniatures, continuing with the same topic, for Dungeons and Dragons. And it can get really, really expensive. So just, you don't need to include things beyond that. But, what are some other examples we've got for music?
Well, so I remember one that you should tell, and I'll talk about the music first.
I can remember a couple of music things, actually.
So often when we do Pendragon, I'm the DJ. And so we had this one session where the most important thing was the fact that one of our players was married to who was she exactly? She was the
daughter of the Count of Salisbury.
Yeah.
The Count had died.
Ah, that's right. And so her brother was about
her sister had... her mother died just recently, and so she'd become the regent for Salisbury. But her brother was just about to have come to age. And she was about to lose all that influence that she had.
And so she wanted her husband to, man up and make a decision.
Seize some power.
Yeah.
Because either he did that, or she was going to become completely obsolete.
And so, but also, his squire was a very beautiful, magical girl. So there was this added layer of jealousy there. And so... There'd
been some problems in the relationship for the last couple of years leading up to this. And so we had the session where we really focused in on it. And
so the thing is...
it was the most heartbreaking adventure I've ever been a part of.
The thing is that all of the players, all of us were behind the marriage going well, and the GM as well.
Yes.
All of us at the table were super behind this whole thing, resolving this whole thing, but we still, obviously, we wanted to be truthful, so we weren't just going to go, okay, fine, they lived happily ever after. No.
Yeah.
We wanted to find the truth, the human truth there as to what would happen. So I had on these 80s power love ballads, I'm all out of love, stuff like that, and we were all feeling it, and the dice just did not agree.
They really didn't.
There were some really good arguments being put out.
So what we did, because this was a scene, and in fact, really, this was the highlight of the entire session, that only one player was involved in. What I let him do, what I let her do, the character was male. What I let her do was to say, my character thinks about what one of the other characters would do. Thinks about the lessons that he's learnt from one of the others. And so that was a way that I was able to sort of use everybody else in that scene as the voice in his head. Yeah, it
was really good.
Even if it ended in horrific tragedy. A couple of critical failures later.
And I want to point this out because I always complain, about things like narrative points living and dying of dice rolls, which I don't always agree that they should, right? Because sometimes your character who's good at picking locks should just pick the lock, right? But with this, it was these key, like we always talk about how in Pendragon, if you've got a certain dramatic pole that you always tend towards, it has to be an actual fight for you to fight against that. So that's why the dice rolls came in.
There always has to be this conflict.
Yeah.
And in this case, the conflict just... The dice said that it was going in a particular way, and then the players leant into that. And then we rolled another dice to see, once the relationship was irrevocably ruined, I rolled a dice while the players rode off on the quest to find out what she would do as a result. And I got a critical fail. Yeah. And so as they rode home from their adventure, they found her body floating down the river, and it was the most traumatic thing I have ever been a part of in a role-playing game.
Oh, I mean, I've been through some traumatic... Actually, mostly in LARP.
Oh,
LARP can get pretty traumatic.
I'm not counting things like that Star Wars game.
No. I'm talking about like in LARP.
Emotionally investing.
In LARP, I mean, maybe I should talk about LARP, and maybe I could get a guest on to talk about LARP one day.
This might be another entire episode to itself.
But in LARP, because you are physically acting out what's going on, the emotions become very, very real sometimes.
And there can be a lot of bleed.
I mean, bleed is huge. Like, there was this one time I was doing, a 3-day weekend game. It was my first ever 3-day weekend game. And I made a dramatic decision for the sake of getting this unique magic power to betray 4 of my friends. And then when next I saw one of them, who was my sister in the game, and she just blanked me, I burst into tears. And so that, because it was so new to me, having never felt LARP bleed before, it was quite weirdly traumatic.
I managed to do that to another player in my first ever LARP.
Really?
I didn't get them to cry, I just got them to want to throttle me.
Right.
Which was exactly like... so my first ever LARP, the thing that got me into it,
was King
so
Arthur.
You may have noticed that I quite like King Arthur. And when I'd heard of this LARP already, the Black Heart of Camelot. So when I heard that it was on, I said, oh, can I join? Can I be King Arthur? I've got a costume already. Not realising that everybody else's costumes were amazing, and I had a bed sheet with a cardboard coat of arms stuck to the front of it. But,
It was amazing.
It worked. It worked. So I found as King Arthur that I had everybody wanting to talk to me. Everyone was constantly coming to talk to me. And so every chance I got, I would prioritise anyone, over the handmaid of my wife, Queen Guinevere. And I heard she wanted to kill me. And then somebody said, and that's why you're having an affair. And I thought, yes, I've succeeded. That was what I was going for.
Right.
That right there of,
right.
Sorry, honey, I'm busy saving the world and not paying enough attention to you.
Oh my god.
And of course she had Lancelot there with her the whole time, saying, you've got to understand where King Arthur's coming from. He's a very busy man, and giving her a shoulder to cry on.
I think it's actually fine.
It was perfect.
It's fine to me that we're talking about LARP, and the reason why is because I just want to put a little advisory statement, which is like, we're talking about using mise-en-scène here, and some people do go as far as to actually put a semi-LARP element into their tabletop role-playing. That same mage game that I was talking about, we did actually do that, and it was wonderful. We went out into the forest looking for my character's mentor, and Jackie had actually got a friend of ours to be waiting out in the forest, did not tell any of us this was happening, and so we actually found him as this character, and it was so special and mind-blowing. So what I was going to say is, yes, putting LARP or semi-LARP elements into a tabletop role-playing game can be fun, but use with caution because of the bleed over of emotions.
I just remembered another tabletop game that I ran when I was in intermediate school.
Go on.
Where I did the same thing. It was a Star Wars game. We did not roll dice for the final lightsaber battle.
You actually did? Oh my god, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, no, we LARPed the final lightsaber battle.
That is amazing.
And it was so much fun. And it was so much better than just going roll to hit, I block, roll to hit, I block.
That is so cute. I love it.
I think we just had cardboard rolls or something.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Obviously, if you're going to fight each other in real life, do with caution, but...
That is classic.
It was good.
Yeah, best to use LARP-safe weapons if you are going to fight. So, I thought of 2 other points. So, music.
I've got a couple too.
Again.
For music, after all those really big dramatic examples, I can also say... And we used the Doctor Who soundtrack for the Doctor Who game. But, it's a nice, easy thing to do. If you're playing a game in a particular world or a setting, it's really easy to get... if it's a licensed game, it's really easy to get the soundtrack. I know when I ran a Star Wars game, different Star Wars game, I went through... I've got all of the soundtracks to the Star Wars movies, and so I went through and I picked the exact track that best represented particular scenes to me.
Nice.
And so I'd put the soundtrack on and I'd hit play when they got to the Hutt's palace, I'd have music from Jabba's palace playing. When they got to a chase, I'd have some exciting chase music happening. I think I used the chase music from Empire Strikes Back, and then, oh no, the Imperials have arrived, dun 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 dun, and so on. And it's just a really easy way to get people into the right mood. Similarly, if you've got a game that's got a very unique setting, then you can use music to evoke that very quickly. So, for example, in Dragons of Tyrrhenia, it's very Italian-focused. So, have some sort of folk Italian music, and that will get people into that right mood. Music is really good for evoking emotion.
We use it all the time in our solo campaigns. So ever since Ravenloft, where
we'd put together soundtracks for them.
We would put together things, and we'd also let the YouTube playlist sort of just take it wherever it wanted to go. So like, we went to some funny places with Tomb of Annihilation.
I don't think we meant for Rock the Casbah to become the main theme.
Oh yeah.
So, it just sort of happened.
No, it's not the main theme.
Or like the main battle theme.
So yeah. So in Ravenloft, Don't Stop Me Now by Queen became Derwin's like personal anthem. Just because he's such a positive force. And then Rock the Casbah became the battle,
battle music.
As if it was like, a Final Fantasy game, right? You go into the fight and here comes the fight music. Rock the Casbah, because we used to sing like, Strahd really don't like it. And a lot of Radiohead and a lot of sort of 80s goth music became part of the soundtrack for Ravenloft, so that was fun.
And actually this goes back into our previous point about co-constructivism, getting your players to come up with their own playlists.
Exactly, because I am the one in charge of these playlists, even though James is the GM. So, like...
Occasionally I'd have particular songs that I'd pick out and be like, oh, add this to the playlist. This is the song for this session. For Planescape, I always had a song for every session.
I was going to say, yeah, that was really good. And in fact, B-52s have weirdly become
Planescape for us.
It's so...
Not what you'd think of normally for Planescape, but there you have it.
Yeah, I'm taking James on an interesting journey while he's taking me on an interesting journey in Planescape, because I'm making this playlist which says Planescape to me, and he's like, how? And basically what it is, it's like half B-52s, like acid pop, and half 90s urban stuff, like She's Homeless and I Wish.
And neither of these is really what Planescape was meant to be, but at the same time, it's what Planescape is to us.
Yeah, trippy and it's an urban setting, and to me it just feels like that.
And of course now any time that I hear
disco music.
Oh, disco music. It makes me think of Tomb of Annihilation, where that was just because that's such a logical,
Well, it was a funny little circular way with that, right? Because initially disco music became the soundtrack because the main character was named Priscilla, and we were like, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. So we started putting disco music on in the back. But then the main anthem for that became Born to Be Alive.
Which, given that your character was a necromancer and it's
fighting
a game about
liches,
it
became the theme song.
Yeah, it worked.
Yeah, so music can be, if you can enjoy music in that setting, I'm sure that some GMs and some players as well would find it really distracting.
So we don't want diegetic, like music's in the scene, and then
diegetic is in the scene. Yeah.
And then non-diegetic.
Non-diegetic is outside of the scene. So we are really good, you and I, we are good at separating it out and what the music can be non-diegetic.
So it's up to you to find which one works better for your group, whether you'd rather have the diegetic or the non-diegetic music.
Yeah.
But,
well, no, I mean, it's still not diegetic. It's not actually happening in the scene, unless they are in a tavern and someone is literally playing.
Sure,
the
but
lute,
you know, like there's a continuum there that you can follow.
Oh,
and it's
absolutely,
up to you to choose whether you want
if your brain sort of works laterally like ours, then, like, yes, your planescape might be filled with hip-hop from the early 90s.
or psychedelic music.
Or,
yeah. Yeah.
And the other point I want to tell, and this is a story that you should tell, and it's just a little mise-en-scène. It's the only thing I could think of lighting. There are definitely GMs who use lighting if they're in a house that is conducive to using lighting.
Yeah, you can lower the lights, you can have candles, you can have mood lighting.
Be safe.
Also, make sure you can actually read the character sheets and the rules. I did a session of Ravenloft where they were in a storm coming out of a swamp and they found a funeral taking place, and I described this funeral, and then while I was describing it, I had one of my hands go under the table, and so suddenly, bang, I slapped the table from underneath. They all jumped, and this was the bang of the body inside the coffin trying to break out, and then bang again, and they all jumped, and they were all absolutely terrified and on edge. You know, the description being good, but getting them by surprise and having the bangs actually happening got them into the mood. And suddenly, there was a power cut at the exact moment that they decided to open up the coffin.
I love it!
Yeah, stop, he's still alive in there! And they broke the chains off, and they hoisted up the lid, and the power went out. All the lights went out, and I reached over the player next to me and put my hand on his throat, and he screamed.
Wow.
And then the power came back on, and we rolled the fight, and it killed them.
I'm proud of you for having the presence of mind to do that in the moment, because I don't think I would have been so quick. That's great. That's absolutely
I mean, again, with that one, you've got to make sure that you've got players who can actually, would be okay with that.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, that is also a really good point that I didn't mention with a little bit about LARP before, and touching, even if you're not doing
there is consent issues on this.
And comfort levels.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't advise adding in semi-LARP elements when you've got a bunch of people that won't fly with. Some people will not be willing to go there with you.
And it depends on the sort of game.
Yeah.
I know we did semi-LARP elements in Pendragon when we had a feast once.
We did. It was
and
awesome.
That was lovely. Whereas I think if we were doing spoilers for a Call of Cthulhu adventure that we're never playing because I sold it in the end, if we were doing Horror on the Orient Express, there's one sequence where the players have to build a model train out of a dead body.
Yeah, don't do that.
And so that might be too far for your semi-LARP experience when you slap a meat bag down on the table and tell them to get building.
On the other hand, your local butcher might be quite happy.
They might thank you.
Taking the offcuts. Okay, no.
And so the last example of this one is props.
Oh, yes.
It can be really nice if you can have, the letters or the magic items or the props. Yes. One example here that I did, when we did Curse of Strahd, I did not have a lot of time, and I'm not actually very good at making realistic props. So I used what I did have. Claire found some copies of some books, and I gave her the books to read. So you found a copy of some Van Richten's guides, and so I gave you the old Van Richten guides from 2nd edition to read.
Yeah.
Which a lot of them, those are written in character, and they've only got very minimal rules referencing in them. So you just read through all of the in-character aspects, and it gave you some more ideas about how these monsters work in this world, and how they might work, which is good for the more unique monsters. But it also meant when one of the NPCs turned out to be Rudolf van Richten in disguise, you had this idea of who he was, and it meant something to you.
Yeah.
But the even better one was when you found the Tome of Strahd. So the Book of Strahd in the adventure is a one-page box text. And I've always dreamt of actually making a Book of Strahd and having this giant thing, except the problem is it's only one page.
Yeah.
So, hey, if you've got to give your players a book written by Strahd telling his backstory, then you give the players a book written by Strahd telling his backstory. I gave Claire a copy of I, Strahd, The Memoirs of a Vampire instead. And that really got you invested in Strahd and who he was and how he thought about himself.
And it also meant that you could bring in more characters from his backstory, like Delisnea.
Yeah.
You brought him in. Yeah, that was a good stroke of to bring up Mage for the third time. We also made props for our characters, and that was really fun. We had spell books, and sometimes our friends love to make our friend Geekly Kitty, who often comes on our streams. She loves to make props and stuff for her characters. So she's like, often for her magical characters, she'll hold her dice in a custom-made spell book that represents that character.
And she'll make stuff for the other players as well, which is really lovely.
Yeah, she makes spell books for all sorts
if
of
you
people.
are a crafty person, it's a lovely thing to be able to contribute to the other people.
Absolutely.
And another example of a prop, which is kind of fun, is for our Pendragon episode where we had the Sword in the Stone. This was on my birthday.
Yeah.
And so some amazingly clever, wonderful, talented, beautiful person
Can you hear my eyes roll?
made a cake in the shape of a stone.
Making a cake in the shape of the stone is easy, but getting the icing grey, that was an interesting adventure.
Yeah. And then you made a
Plasticine anvil.
plasticine anvil, wrapped it up in tin foil, got a plastic sword from the $2 shop, drove it in, so that when we had...
Broke the tip of it, so...
Yeah, so that it would go in.
Yeah, that's probably the hardest part.
Yeah. So that when we got to the session, I don't like NPC theatre, but there are a few moments you have to have, and if you're doing the Great Pendragon campaign, you have to have the cutscene of the Sword in the Stone. And so when we got there, we had, here it is, the sword in the stone, and I got to draw it out and be Arthur. That was pretty special.